Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We apologize. We're running a few minutes late. It's the 21st century, and of course, we still have tech issues these days in 2018. I'm very, very excited. This is Richard Harris from Sales Hacker. Have three brilliant minds with us today as we cover this topic. It's going to be a really interesting one. Conducting the Symphony, how to coordinate your sales planning initiatives. Super, super excited. Just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, as you know, in case you're not familiar with us. First of all, please go into the chat feature or the question feature, introduce yourself, tell us the name of your company, who you're with. We really want to keep this social and light. We really enjoy this. We want to make sure we get to know you at an intimate level as best we can in a webinar situation. Obviously, if you have questions, don't wait till the end. Ask them in the moment, because in the moment is when we can really capture some intensity and some intent from everyone. So it'll be a lot of fun if you guys can bring your questions as they come forward. And then, of course, yes, we are recording, so it is live, but it'll also be on Memorex for those of us who are old enough to know what that means. And we'll go forward with Memorex. If you have to leave early, feel free. If you want to share this with other people, feel free. We appreciate everybody taking time out of their day, particularly was it the 21st of the month, when you got 9 days to close out the quarter and the month. So we really, really appreciate y'all being here. So with that being said, let's go ahead and do some basic introductions. I'm going to keep it really short and light because I think we've got some amazing content. So first of all, we have Hunter James, who's the Senior Director from the Voyant Group. Hunter helps customers define how they work and can meet the increasing demands with sales performance. So he really gets in, and as I understand it, Hunter, correct me if I'm wrong, you really sort of get into the nuts and bolts and the weeds of where we can help the team, not just from a training perspective, not just from a dials and make more phone calls perspective, but really putting all that together. Do I have that right?
You have that right. We're really focused on the operational aspect of sales performance management.
That's great. Thank you. Jason is here. Jason Lowe is the global head of sales over at Anaplan, where his responsibilities around sales performance management and effectiveness in different lines of business. So, my interpretation of that, and Jason, correct me, is, I work with so many small sort of startups, is that, well, once you get to a certain stage, you need a much more strategic mind around this, right? It's not to be a VP of sales of 8 reps and going out and help close those deals. You've got lots of reps in lots of places, so you need the strategic approach. And I think that's, if I understand what you do, I think that's what you do. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jason.
No, you're absolutely right. So and we'll talk about this, of course, in the session today, but look, you have this larger ecosystem of all these movable pieces. And so how do you coordinate all of this? And spoiler alert, they're coordinating the symphony of how do you tie all these things together from a go-to-market standpoint, both on your sales execution side and your marketing execution side. And then, so what Anaplan is doing is providing solutions in this space that allow us to understand and analyze and optimize, as well as to coordinate and to conduct that together.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. And Linda, I know you didn't really want to give me a bio other than to say that you're a jack of all trades, or I should say a Jill of all trades. Linda is the director of finance over at Tibco. And I think she brings this amazing approach because, particularly as salespeople, we don't get the mindset of these finance people that we're often engaged with, sometimes behind the scenes. And so I'm really excited to hear Linda's perspective on this sales side and sales planning and strategy, because, as a VP of sales, my biggest fear was ever having to talk to someone in finance, right? Like I didn't.
I think everyone feels that way. Don't feel like you're different.
I always felt that if I talked to Linda and I could talk about the present value of money, I could at least build some level of trust that I understood her world. But
that's a little more Richard.
So anyway, so I want to thank you all for being a part of this conversation, and we're really, really glad you're here. So I really want to start at the beginning, and I'm going to turn this over to Jason. This is going to be one of those webinars where I might chime in a little, but I really want to let the experts be the experts in this one. But as we were talking about this and planning this, we sort of wanted to take this first view of how do we even start talking about these larger themes, right? We talk about this disruption in the business and how we've got to improve all this stuff. So Jason, that's really where I want to start. And then I know we're going to sort of dig deeper into different layers and sort of get smaller and smaller from there. But I'll turn it over to you at this point, Jason.
Richard, thank you so much, and I appreciate that, and I certainly appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak here with you today. So as in the lead up to this webinar, we were having conversations, and one of the conversations that we were having was this concept of look, there's a lot of stuff happening, right? There's competitive pressures, there's pricing pressures, there's just a lot of changes, and there's a lot of disruption with respect to technologies. And organizations, like when we're engaged, and this is how we started having our conversations, is that when we're engaged in these sessions, a lot of times the conversations come around as to like, well, there's so much noise out there, right? And so how do I make sense of this? And one of the common tenets that when we do a lot of business consulting and sales consulting work with our clients is this concept, and actually I have a couple slides, so I'll throw some of this stuff up. So there's this concept when you're trying to navigate the disruption and a lot of things that are happening in the world, we have this idea that we often say, which is how you go to market. That's just as important as what you as a company ultimately bring to market. And so what do I mean by that? So what do you bring to market? So maybe as an organization, maybe you're in the bottle capping business, right? Maybe you're in the mutual funds business, maybe you're in the retail business or the automotive space or what have you. You know what products you bring to market, right? Because they're on your website, right? And your customers know what products that you bring to market because that's ultimately what you're selling to them. And your competitors know what you bring to market, right? Because every time you launch a new product or enter into a new space, you typically will take a press release out and it goes into the public domain, right? And kind of one of the best case scenarios of launching a new product is that if it's wildly successful, your customers are going to kind of look at you and see what you're doing, and they're going to try and copy you, right, and take market share. And that's what you bring to market. But how you go to market, that's your secret sauce, right? That's the thing that you don't tell anyone. It's how you're strategically aligning your chess pieces so that you're getting all your generals to work. I'm mixing tons of metaphors, but so how you go to market, this is the secret that you as an organization, as to how can we strategically take down a market and strategize in order to break into a space. And so one of the basic tenets, particularly as you're going through a period of disruption, whether it be competitive disruption or technological disruption or what have you, is that it's important to delineate certainly what you're bringing to market. But as important as what you're ultimately bringing to market, the way that you execute on that, the how you go to market, is just as important. And then, so typically in these conversations, people will then talk with us and say, well, how do you build this go-to-market strategy? And actually, when I think about this, and I just wanted to bring up this visualization a little bit. So if you think of the go-to-market strategy, your go-to-market strategy is basically three legs of a stool, and you're really answering three questions. You're asking the questions of where am I going to sell as a company, how am I going to sell, and what am I going to sell? And so the where to sell is like, look, we have a universe out there of places that we can sell. So how am I going to slice and dice this so that I can most effectively take down a market in order to have revenue success or roll out new products or whatever? Am I going to slice and dice it where I'm going to market by geographies or by industries or by revenue segments, or how am I going to carve up this universe? And so as part of your go-to-market strategy, to answer the question of where am I going to sell, this at Anaplan, we put this together under this umbrella of that we call sales planning. And then the concept of how to sell is like, so how are we going to sell? How am I going to push and motivate in order to get all my soldiers to walk in lockstep together? How am I going to drive that so that when we execute our go-to-market strategy, we're able to put this together? And so the how to go to market is something, again, when we talk about this in a universe of something we call sales incentives. And then the what to sell, and the what to sell is like what's the velocity? And like, so maybe I have a sales force of sandbaggers and stretchers, and do I have the right throughput and the right velocity from a pipeline perspective? Do I need a 3x pipeline, a 5x, a 10x based on the profiles of my sellers? So do I have the right pipeline velocity as well as the sales forecast? Am I an accuracy of the sales forecast and all those things? And that what to sell, and I'll talk about this in a second, is something that we call sales insights. And so the idea, at least when Richard, when we were having these conversations, the first topic I certainly wanted to share was this idea of obviously when you're as organizations and all of us that are sales leaders or work in a sales support role, like we're trying to navigate a lot of movable parts and movable pieces of our go-to-market strategies. And so it's like, as we're putting this together, it's important to remember that, yes, we bring to market very unique and special and valuable solutions to our customers, but just the products, the weight of the organization can't fall just on the prowess of the products that we're bringing to market. It's also how we go to market and how we strategize and how efficiently we can do that and get our people to work in lockstep together. And that's just that level of efficiency of defining your go-to-market strategy and having a plan for that is as important as ultimately what products you're bringing to market themselves.
I've got a question for you, Jason. And again, I think you've answered it, but I want to, oftentimes when we work at Sales Hacker, sometimes we're working with big organizations like you and larger enterprise, but sometimes we're working with these smaller, these startup worlds.
Sure.
And the phrase that we use a lot, and I think you're alluding to is, your ideal customer profile, right? Like, so when you talk about where, how, and what to sell, who do you sell to fall into that? Because that feels like a really important piece of, well, I got to know who I'm talking to before I figure out where I'm going to sell. But maybe you mean who when you said one of those others. So I just want to clarify that a bit.
No. So that's a great point. So the who, and the who, not to be confused with the 1960s, the who, no, but the who is part of this defining my market and my where to sell. And actually, to illustrate that point here, let me see if I can jump somewhere real quick. Okay. So if I break out, this is kind of an Anaplan product thing. I wasn't planning on going into this, but because you mentioned this is a great point. So each of these individual, so we call this the honeycomb, right? We call this the honeycomb, one, because it looks like a honeycomb, right? And the second reason we call it a honeycomb is you think of the source of the word honeycomb. Honeycomb is from a colony of worker bees, right? And how the outputs of one part of the colony directly impact the success or the failure of another part of the colony. And that's actually really analogous to in the sales world, right? Where the outputs of one part of your selling organization directly impact the success or the potentials of the other. And so talking about that go-to-market strategy, like we did a minute ago, right? The three legs to the stool of answering the questions of where to sell, how to sell, what to sell, which is what we were talking about, sales planning and sales incentives and sales insights, we start being able to go around the honeycomb. And so to your point, so the first part of this is the sales plan. This is the where am I going to sell? And so I talked about the idea of what are the theaters I'm selling into, or how am I going to slice and dice my universe to figure out my go-to-market strategy? And that's something we call territory planning. But within that, it's kind of like, who is the kind of customer that we want to be? If I'm in the wealth management business, and I'm looking to build out my clientele, who do I want my clientele for my wealth management business to be? Do I want to focus on .com billionaires? So I'm going to be the wealth management firm of .com billionaires. Or do I want to focus on oil barons and baronesses, right? Or do I want to focus on working class people that are saving for retirement, saving for their kids' college? And so part of this is understanding who am I going to be targeting to? And so this is part of this concept, to your point, is this thing we call account segmentation. And so it's basically identifying like what are those populations account by account. And then there's the concepts of identifying and segmenting these accounts and oftentimes scoring, because maybe times, and especially to your point, if I'm a smaller organization that's trying to get the biggest bang for my buck from a sales execution standpoint, or if I'm a larger organization looking for efficiency, a lot of times I need to score my accounts. And my accounts are, maybe it's based on desirability of where we want to build our business. Maybe it's based on TAM, or total addressable market. Maybe it's based on other attributes that we as an organization are saying this is our strategic mission. So part of the account segmentation piece, we're going through and we're picking and choosing the who's, right? Who are those people and who are those things we're going to be targeting? And then similarly, it's kind of like when you go to the grocery store, like you have all of these. I live in California. This is a side note, but living in California, we passed these laws that you have to pay separately for grocery bags. And what used to be a perfectly civilized experience of going to the grocery store and getting all our things from our cart, and they'd say paper or plastic, and we would leave with the items from the store reasonably in paper bags. And now what happens is people don't want to pay extra for the bags, and so they're leaving the store with a gallon of milk under our arm and 2 things of dog food and some baby diapers and whatever. And it's like we're hoarding stuff, right? And so the bags gave us the ability to bring all this stuff together. So the account the account segments are the individual items that I've taken off of the shelves at the grocery store that I'm going to focus on, and I want to buy this bottle of hot sauce, and I want to buy this bottle of things, or I want to target on this customer, and then this feeds directly to territories, because those are the bags, because you can't ask your sellers to leave the grocery store like crazy people with all these items under their arms and dropping cans of soda while they're trying to head to their cars. Instead, what you do is you give them ways to logically group together those things. And so your territories are the grocery bags for the items. And so hopefully that answers, that's kind of, you may have asked me the time and I told you how to build a watch, but the idea is that the who is a key part of this. And this is part of the account segmentation and the scoring part. And then we conveniently put those together as part of in our territory plans. And those are our bags, as well as then we have to align to that our quota plan. So because not every customer is treated the same, and the potential for each customer is different. So understanding at an account level or at an industry level or whatever your profiles are, assigning quotas directly to those account segments to capture those territories.
Yeah, I love this image too, because as a sales leader, I don't care what or part of the what stage your business is, all of these pieces of the honeycomb have to come into play at some point. And this is probably one of the best images I've seen to remind us of, oh yeah, I got to look at that. And oh yeah, I got to look at this part, and I got to look at that part. So I really, really value this image, and it was one of the reasons I wanted you to put it up here, was because it's it's a great checklist of things like, oh yeah, I got to look at that too. Sure. That's great. So where do we go from here, right? So that you laid out this amazing visual for us and explained where we need to be. The watch is working perfectly, by the way. I appreciate it. Excellent Swiss timing combined with your iWatch features. Where do we take this conversation next for the rest of the audience?
Sure. So I think that it's about, so what's interesting about this, and this goes back to how we were designing this conversation. And for those of you on the phone, what happened is Richard and I and Hunter and Linda, we were having this great conversation. We said, you know what, this is an idea that would be interesting sharing with the organization. And so firstly, again, we appreciate allowing us to share some of these ideas. One of the things I think where we can go next is to understand there is and to your point, Richard, about this image, is that there's also a connectedness to this, right? Because so sales coverage is this idea of capacity planning, like how big of a sales force and what types of roles and where should they be organized, and then that feeds into territory. So imagine as an organization, like I'm going to say, you know what, we have a headcount open in the New York City metro area. And HR is like, well, I want to, like, yeah, we have this headcount open, but I want to wait maybe till next quarter to fill it. And from an HR perspective, that may make a lot of sense. But what people often forget as part of this go-to-market strategy is that decision of, look, I have a headcount open, or I have a headcount open, should I put it in the New York, the New York metro area or in the Boston area, right? And so that one decision not only is an HR question, but how you fill that, how you answer that decision directly impacts how the territories are defined, right? And then once you do the territories, it then affects how what the quotas are going to be, right? Because the quotas are the clearest sign of the milestones that we're then going to be able to project revenue on. And then it also determines on which accounts are going to be serviced, and then it also determines how the incentive programs are going to be run, which then determines for that position of in the New York metro area what the pipeline is going to be like, and then ultimately the forecast, and then ultimately the sales. And so the idea of this is that so many times people try to look at these as individual items or individual things, but it's about looking, it's the, you are the conductor and they are your symphony. And if you're the conductor of a symphony, would it make sense to rehearse the percussion section in Boston, and the string section in Los Angeles, and the brass section in Florida? And the answer is no. You need to understand, bring them together so that they can make beautiful music together, and understand when you make a decision in one part of your business, this is how it ripples. And so I think from a conversation perspective, I mean, I'd love to, a colleague of mine, Hunter James, who's on the phone from Buoyant Group, I mean, Hunter, I'd be curious to talk a little bit about the sales plans, right? Because this where to sell, this area that we have highlighted here, and just talking about the connections within that and how that works and the observations you've had.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first observation I've had is this slide right here is very representative of what's been happening over the past few years within the quote-unquote sales performance management space. We all know that was an acronym made up years ago to sell software, but actually, if you kind of pull it apart, sales performance management is truly all of the pieces of the operational side of your end-to-end sales cycle, starting day one of your year and ending at day 365. So when we start to think about the sales plan, what I always recommend to organizations is most companies now have a CRM, which is full of information. It is full of data that you are not using for anything except for to look at accounts, by and large. That data, if pivoted and used in the right way, can be a perfect starting point to define your ideal customer profile, Richard, as you mentioned. You're going to take that data, you're going to figure out what are the 5 key criteria. And I use the number 5 because I've seen organizations go with 10, 15 KPIs, and then all of a sudden you've got paralysis by analysis. You're looking at accounts and they all look exactly the same, because with that many metrics, unfortunately, everyone's going to kind of bubble up to the same level. So figure out the 5 key metrics that you think define your ideal customer profile and scale them, rank them. Put some sort of criteria on those metrics to build out your book of business, your list. And that's a great starting point to build out your territory. And that territory plan ultimately will then align to an effective quota, because you'll look at your sales reps, and Linda's going to be able to speak to this firsthand. You'll look at your sales reps and you'll go, okay, this sales rep in North Dakota has to cover 300 accounts to hit the same level of quota that a sales rep in San Francisco can do with 10. So how do we make sure that we scale it so that every rep has a fair and equitable opportunity in their specific marketplaces? And that's
I want to interrupt for a second too, and I know Linda's been sitting patiently. I made a joke earlier about sales sort of avoiding finance, but as I look at this plan, and this slide, and I hope everybody's seeing it. If you're not, let us know. But this is that part where finance really does come in and help, right? This is where finance can step in, and maybe you are challenged with HR because they want to wait a quarter because in their part of the world that they need to wait, but finance can step in and kind of go, hey, wait a second, here's what that's going to do, right? Because as salespeople, we sort of go in, we go in as salespeople, like, what do you mean you're going to wait? Oh, you can't do that. You're messing up my chance to make goal and quota. And that's not what HR needs to hear, right? HR needs to hear from finance why this is so important. So I just love to, Linda, how do you see this from your world and your vision, and what advice can you give to people too, if you don't mind?
Well, it's huge for me to be involved on this side of it, because from the finance side, obviously, bottom line is what's important. So being able to give that cost benefit analysis as to whether we bring somebody on earlier or later, or how we compensate them between the creating comp plans, which rolls into the quota planning. We've done things a little backwards. I would have loved us to start with territory planning. We started with quota planning because that's where our biggest pain point was. Once again, we've got to get the sales in there so that the rest of it can get to the bottom line. So I'm kind of like I said before, a jack of all trades. I have to touch virtually everything on this honeycomb to make things work.
And I would bet every department has a honeycomb like this. HR has their own honeycomb of this, right?
I would agree.
Right? IT has their side. There's one thing I want to bring up that I don't see on here. Maybe this is part of quota planning, and maybe I'm overly simplifying it, but the one thing that I think that matters really, really well in this sales planning and sales incentive and part of the orchestra is the ramp time. And is ramp worthy of having its own little hexagon, or is that really part of quota planning or territory planning? Because I think that's a really important piece that we often forget, right? Yeah. And even on the flip side of ramp time, what about attrition? Right. Yeah. So what happens when your reps, you go through attrition? Because to me, those are two really important things. And maybe you are including them in some of these other pieces of the honeycomb, but it's just something that stuck out to me and I wanted to ask about it.
Yeah. So
I'll say that sorry.
No, Linda, I will talk about it from a honeycomb perspective, but let me start from a honeycomb perspective, and then I'll pass it to you from a real world perspective. Is that fair?
Sure.
Excellent. So Richard, that's an excellent observation. There's a reason why you'll notice the coverage model from a sales thing touches quotas, right? Because there's a direct correlation between the performance and the milestones we're going to put together and the people we're bringing in. Now, arguably, there could be a separate medallion as part of the honeycomb or component of the honeycomb that talks specifically about that. But to be honest, what we're trying to do is, but then to be honest, there's always exceptions that this is an ever expansive thing for an organization. We tried to simplify it to have a conversation, but you're absolutely right. And what I would add to that is not only the ramp period. So the problem, especially in the sales organization, it's typically not day one. Day one, we have our sales methodology in place, we have our quotas in place, we have our comp plans in place, or whatever day we have this stuff, and then we run. And if everything stayed in the pristine, ideal state for the rest of the year, kind of like after you've cleaned up the house, if no one touches anything and no one makes a mess, the house is gonna be perfect forever. But the problem is the kids start running in and they have their friends over and things go crazy.
Where is that house? I need to go live in that house.
Well, that's precisely. And so the idea behind this, at Anaplan, we have this acronym that we call EPAT, EPATT. And what that stands for is employ. So the new employee process. So it's employ, promote, leave of absence, transfers, and terminations. That's the chaos. You have this revolving door of new people coming in. You have high attrition in some areas. You're bringing on new people. You have to be hireds in places, and it's managing and making decisions in that chaos. So in addition to just the onboarding of new reps and the ramp process, as well as the exiting or the termination or the attrition, there's also promotions and reorgs and leave of absences and transfers within the process. And it's managing and mitigating those risks to give you those level of real-time insights to do all this what if modeling. Well, what if we do reorg it like this? Or what if we do it like this? And what's every permutation, and then what's every potential outcome of it, as well as what is, and then what are all the possible outcomes and how likely they are, right? So I'm again, watch telling you how to make it, but I think you're spot on by talking about the people data and understand the people data, but it's understanding that it's more than just onboarding and offboarding of people, of ramping and exiting. It's this larger process and it's managing that evolution, and those are tightly together. And that's from a go-to-market strategy. Those are well represented and also why they're here. But Linda, I would love to hear certainly your experiences at TIBCO and as just a professional in this space. I'd love to hear your perspective of new hires and the ramping process and all of that.
Well, that was one of the issues that came up in our implementation just on the quota planning. So with the quota planning, we have tops down and bottoms up to work through. So like you said, you may have a set of people initially and you've got all kinds of people moving in and out, terminations, hiring. Our company doesn't believe in ramping at this point. That's one of the things we're working on with the comp committee, which makes my job very interesting. Well, how can you give somebody a quota? They haven't even been here 2 weeks, but you're making us have quota for the first month. So those are the type of things, like I said, I'm a jack of all trades because I end up being the liaison as to how do we get things to be in the right order. But that's where Anaplan really helped us, was to be able to always put in like an annual quota and be able to seasonality, have the seasonality apply to it. So it doesn't matter when you start in the year. Theoretically, if you have a $3 million full year quota, if you start in period 6, based on seasonality, you may have 75% of it still if the seasonality rolls that way. So we have seasonality at this point. We have not implemented ramping, but that is one of the things that we're working with the comp committee now for the 2019 process to be able to do that. And I believe that that'll be a very easy change within Anaplan. TIBCO does a lot of acquisitions, so the ability to have the flexibility with acquisitions and the hierarchy and be able to add them in without having to recreate the wheel is huge for us. So once again, we just did when say we brought in another 100 people. In the past, that would be done in Excel, or it would be done on a piece of paper on the side, and we kind of make things up and throw it out the door. This way, we have a quick consolidation where management can see it real time if they want to see where we're falling out when we allocate those quotas.
Yeah, and Linda, when we started working together, and I guess we probably should have led with this with our introductions, but TIBCO and Voyant have actually partnered together on their Anaplan implementation for quota planning and also for the business process aspect of it. So we spent our first week on site really digging into the business process. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Linda, but I think we probably spent maybe a quarter of that time talking about the standard business process. And then the rest of it were these edge cases that come in throughout the year that end up spinning your team out of control, and you're not able to respond fast enough.
Absolutely. And it was a huge help to do that. Because, I mean, you guys came in and helped us really take a look at, what our current process was, and then how do we get to what we really want to do in a more efficient way.
Yeah, and that's a recommendation I would give to anybody out there listening. If you're looking at solving one of the pieces of this honeycomb, first off, you don't have to bite off the entire sales performance management journey at one time. And I would not recommend you do that, because otherwise you're going to end up in a 10-year consulting engagement with zero to show for it after 10 years. Yep. Select the place that's the biggest pain point, even if it's out of cycle like Linda's was. Quota did not make sense to start for them, but it was the biggest pain point, so that's where we started.
How do you, I don't mean to interrupt, but how do you, because you're right, like every one of these things feels super important, right? So, and maybe each of you have your own opinion to this, so I'd love to hear, but how do you figure out where to even start, right? Like clearly we're not going to go through contests and spiffs, right? Like that's not the primary piece, right? How do you know where to start? Or is it more important to let's create a list of our top 10, take a few days to think it through, and then we might need to reorganize that list? Like, because this can feel this looks really cool, but it can feel very daunting if you're not careful.
Well, absolutely. Let me say that when we came in, I've got to tell you, it was like, oh, we want to do these 100 things. Wow, our scope was way bigger than what we really wanted, and we really sat down and identified what the real pain point was. I started in May of last year, so I came in period 6 for the company. I wasn't around for the quota setting process the year before, but it was done in Excel, and it didn't consolidate. Management couldn't see how it rolled up. We couldn't see what the over-assignment or under-assignment was. So how do you really run your business if you don't even know if you have enough people to cover the productivity side to reach the numbers that you're trying to get to? So that was probably our biggest pain point, was being able to take a process that was disjointed. It worked, but somehow those Excel files, the final ones were not anywhere in a saved drive that I could find when I got here. Okay. So you can imagine trying to reconcile something back was a little difficult for me. So how
big are you guys? Right?
We've got about 4,000 employees.
Right.
So we're not a small company. We're not a small company. So it was a lot of spreadsheets done in different regions, in different areas. Yeah. And when you started talking about territory planning, that's huge to us. That's kind of the next. Well, we're doing 2 different steps after the quota planning, but we really used quota planning as our proof of concept.
Got it. And that's great.
Like, and that was huge.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from Hunter and Jason too. Like, from the customer side, from the TIBCO side, they figured out that's what it was. I'm sure you guys helped figure that out. How else do you help people figure out where their biggest pain point is? Because I feel like that's the hardest part, is where to start, right?
So I'll take the first stab at this and then pass it over to you, Jason. So I'll use TIBCO as a great example, because Linda's right. When we started having conversations with them, there's this giant engagement that is total business process transformation, and there are 3 people on the TIBCO side that are going to be a part of this project. There's no way to bite off.
We only had 6 or 8 weeks to do it in. Let's add that to it with doing our regular job. So.
Okay.
So what we did was we actually sat down with a little bit of a timeline on the table, and we mapped out. Look, here's all of the things that you do throughout the year over the course of your sales performance management process. Here's where it's important to have these pieces live. Now, we did that with a little bit of a different lens of here's how it would be best case scenario if you were to start from scratch with no time constraints and no sort of initial goals. What we found, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, is they had a date on the calendar where if we got quota planning right, all of a sudden everyone's eyes would be open internally on, hey, there's a smarter way to do all of these other things that we want to bite off. So part of it is leveraging your project to build a bigger internal business case of solving the larger problem.
That's great. So you sort of tried to figure out what's the first domino.
Yeah, I mean, where's the elephant? We don't want to eat the whole thing at once.
Jason, how about you from your side, right? Because this is, in theory, this is your world. I mean, not theory, reality. This is your world. How do you guys encourage people to figure out which one of these pieces to bite off first?
Yeah. So first of all, eating the elephant one bite at a time. I love that. I use that all the time, Hunter. So I'm glad you threw that out there. So here's, okay, so as a solution provider, right? So let me, I guess, explain. I'm going to use like an analogy. So imagine, Richard, that you have to go to your primary care physician. Like it's your annual physical and you're going to go in. So when you go in and talk to your health provider, they don't come in and say, Richard, how's your neck feeling? Richard, how's your knee feeling? Richard, how's that elbow of yours? How's where? What they come in and they'll say is, Richard, where does it hurt? And then you then say, oh, you know what? Well, I've been having this weird thing that's been doing whatever. And then it's from that conversation. And so at Anaplan, we try to take a very, very specific thing. It's, look, we do a lot of things, but trying to boil the ocean or eat that elephant, I mean, it can be daunting. And so the first question is where does it hurt, right? And then that's the thing. And then when you say where it hurts, sorry about that. Here's something. So I guess keeping the analogy of healthcare. So another analogy is, so I have allergies. I have horrible allergies, and my eyes get itchy, and my nose gets runny, and whatever. And a lot of times when I go in, and then so I'll go to the drugstore and I will get Claritin or Allegra or some drug to help with my allergies. And so what I think sometimes is, okay, so I basically have a drug to treat my allergies. And the reality is I don't have, that's not treating my allergies, that's treating my symptoms. My allergy is maybe my dog, maybe I'm allergic to my dog, or maybe I'm allergic to pollen, or maybe my dog was running in pollen and came up and jumped on my face. And that's the root of it. And so one of the things that we also get to, in addition to kind of the physician thing of where does it hurt, is it's important when you have these conversations is the pain that I'm feeling today actually the cause, or is it the symptom? And so sometimes, using quotas, because Linda and Hunter both described this perfectly, that a lot of times the pain may represent itself as, we're having a problem in our FP&A process or in our annual operating plan process, and finance is having a hard time with top down versus bottom up, and there's no reconciliation. And what we might discover is that may be a symptom, but the root cause is it's because of the quota planning process, or vice versa. So it's really being prescriptive. So understanding that, look, as an organization, you have a lot of moving pieces, and the benefit from an Anaplan perspective is we're able to be best in class across the entire go-to-market strategy. We're not coming in and have a single thing and saying, how can I sell this to you, or how can I sell this to you? It really gives us the flexibility to say, like, let's have a more comprehensive, substantive conversation and figure out where is it hurting. And then also, okay, I hear that this is your pain, but is that a symptom? Is that actually the root cause? Or are you just describing a symptom? And as we dive into that symptom, the root cause may be elsewhere. Hopefully that helped answer part of your question.
It did for me. I thought that was great. That was outstanding. So we've done a lot around this, right? We've dived into this in quite detail, which I really love. Where do we go from here in this conversation, right? As we talk about orchestrating the rest of this symphony, Jason, where should we take this conversation for the audience from here?
Well, I mean, I think as an organization, and I'll let certainly a Hunter works with clients day in and day out as they're transforming their go-to-market strategy, and Linda's been incredible as a champion and an advocate over at Tibco in her work to transform this. So I'll start, and I can certainly pass this over to them. But I mean, for me, it's like, look, there's so Hunter talked about our CRM systems earlier, right? And so if you think about it, like our CRM systems that we've implemented hopefully at some 91% of organizations have implemented a CRM system. So congratulations if you've done it, and your peers have done it, and your competitors have done it. And so what at one time was this differentiator. I mean, there's huge value in these solutions, but it's something that's relatively ubiquitous. And so as someone that's implemented a CRM system, if I said to you, like where do you as an organization, can you point to a place in your organization where you manage all of your open opportunities? And you'd be like, yeah, it's right there. It's in my CRM system, all of them, opportunities by stages. And I say, great. And then I say, well, is there a place in your organization that you manage all of your sales employee data? And you're like, yeah, it's right over there in my HR system, and I have all that information. And I say, great. So tell me, is there a place that you look in your organization that you can point and say, this is where I'm building my go-to-market strategy, that I am making not only the decisions that I need in the blocking and tackling of the stuff that I have to do in my CRM system today, but where are we going to be where do we want to grow as an organization, and where do we want to be 12 months from now, or 24 or 36 months? And the answer of this larger go-to-market strategy is like, well, I have this pile of papers that are organized by staples and paper clips, and maybe in the journal of my notebook, I've written in the margins, or sorry, in the margins, I've written some notes, and maybe on my whiteboard in my office, I have some plans that I have. But the answer is, it's kind of all over the place, right? It's not only having all this information all over the place, but it's understanding that when I make that hiring freeze, or I'm going to build a head count in a certain region, it directly impacts my coverage models and my territories and my quotas and my pipeline and my potential and my revenue and how the comp plans are driven, and it affects and how we're going to do pricing and discount. I mean, it is this one thing that you need to think about this all together. And so the one takeaway I would say as an organization is try to figure out, how do you get your arms around this? Because it goes back to that idea that I said in the beginning of how you go to market. It's as important as the products themselves. And this is in a world where everyone has, or 91% of organizations have a CRM system, and it's great because they work and they're very valuable. But it's like, where are the efficiencies and where are the ways that I can streamline this to be a more productive organization? And a lot of times it's your go-to-market strategy is the thing that can differentiate you from your competitors, whether it be your culture or the way you align your people, the way you organize yourselves. And so I would say, certainly think about that. And then once you think about it in the context of it's this interconnected web, or this interconnected honeycomb of all these processes that work together, then kind of like going to your primary care physician and saying, well, looking at all of this, where does it hurt? Like where? And then to find out, is it really, is that the root cause of it? Or am I just complaining about a symptom, but the root cause is really something else?
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, go ahead, Hunter. Go ahead. Jump in.
I was going to say, Jason, I think that pivots almost perfectly into Linda's story at TIBCO on how they decided where was that toe of the elephant, and how do we bite this off and actually successfully address that initial problem that you were talking about. So can we move on to those slides?
Sure, of course.
Perfect.
Let me.
There we go. This is perfect. We can go on to the next slide. That's fine. All right, so we've got words on the screen. These are really just meant to be takeaways. If you want to write them down, honestly, I'm going to ask questions just to kind of guide the conversation, but Linda has graciously offered to kind of share her story on how they identified a problem, selected a solution, and then purposefully planned to solve that problem. So let's talk a little bit about where you started, Linda, identifying that problem.
Okay. Before I got here, like I said, I came in the 6th month of our fiscal year. It apparently took them 4 months to get their quotas out. So that was for a multitude of reasons. They had, like I said, they had spreadsheets by regions. They had people disagreeing with how the numbers came up. They had it done at the finance level and then pushed to the regions, and then the regions would come back and not like how that had been done. So for quota plans not to go out till the 4th month of the fiscal year is a problem. It's a problem for incentive comp. I mean, we continued to pay people, but was on more of a draw type situation. So it was a pretty big issue for the company. So to be able to see that and know that we needed to do something, if you imagine I'm coming in and going, wow, how are they even functioning? And with the data that I was able to access.
Yeah, they must be thrilled.
Linda, as an agent of change, you walked in the door and said, we got a problem, guys. This has to be addressed before next year.
I'm a glutton for punishment, without a doubt, but I love having the ability to come back and say, look, we were able to do, once we had, I think it took us 6-7 weeks, we got the quota planning set in based on knowing what it was that we wanted in the end state. We were able to do quotas within like 2 to 3 weeks. Now, you're still going to have some issues with management not liking the way the numbers come out, and you have to do some massaging there, but that's more of an internal, you've got to get management online and make sure that all goes well. But once again, me being from the FP&A side, we get the numbers, so we have to do a tops down. You guys have to hit this number by region. And then we had to make sure that, we have enough coverage. So you had to do it person by person from the bottoms up to see whether or not you're going to get to those numbers. So huge for us. One of the reasons why we have done the quota planning, that we're moving towards territory management, and this week started our budget plan in Anaplan, is that we got the CFO to be, he is really the champion of how we got there. Once we were able to get him online, getting the EVP of sales was like, wow, if you can do this and do it quicker and better, this would be great. And, we can lock it down. Not only can you lock it down, from when I got here, when I had to start giving people quotas, literally they didn't have a plan as to how they set quotas. If they weren't using territory management, they were like, oh, well, this person makes X number of dollars, they should be able to do theoretically, 3 times their incentive side, or whatever the number was. I mean, it was literally on the back of an envelope was the way we were doing quota.
Yep.
I mean, once a year they maybe did a little bit more planning towards it, but this is huge the way we were able to do it.
Well, and Linda, one of the other things that I thought was super unique, we show up on site for kickoffs, and usually it's the people who are managing the process itself that are there for the discovery session. We show up at TIBCO, and there are executive vice presidents and SVPs either calling in or in the meeting for the actual kickoff for a project. So Linda, what did you do to get them actually in the room to commit to making a change?
Should I laugh? Should I make you laugh and say that I said I'd quit if they didn't show up and support this? not so much. But you know what? They were very excited about it. I mean, you've got to think about the fact that the two main people, Anupam and I, you've got a director and a senior director who did the whole implementation. We really didn't have anybody else on the team do it. We took the input from all the senior executives, and although it could have been done at a lower level, we took ownership of it because we wanted to prove that this was right, so that as a point of concept or proof of concept, we were able to get them to do this for other things as well, because we could see the value in what this was going to provide for us. So the company put some high-level resources on this, and we did it on the side. I mean, I had 2 full-time jobs for the time that we went through it, but the outcome of having it done, when I get, on a weekly basis, I get new hires, I can go in there, put them into the system, and send it over to our commissions team so that they can get comp plans sent out to reps within their first 2 weeks. There were times last year where we'd be 2 months behind and not ever given somebody a quota. Huge.
Just out of curiosity, and Linda, I don't know if you are able to touch this or can feel this, but could you feel the mood swing from this negative, oh my God, we're never going to get our comp plan? Like, could you see or feel the sales team get on board with this and go, oh my God, like you set this is the beautiful thing about being the new person, is you get to be a hero. But were you able to see that results pretty quickly?
Oh, absolutely. Outside of, kind of the fighting with, well, you can't give somebody that high of a quota, Yeah, the general working with the sales organization. I'm a non-salesperson, obviously, so I look at it totally different. But absolutely, and when they can see how we've come up with it and how we benchmark against other people this was another one of the issues, is if you have different grade levels of sales reps or different types of sales reps, you don't want, say somebody has a base commission percent of 5%, you don't want somebody at the same grade level getting 10%. We needed to level set how things were working. And this really, it gave us such visibility into the data real time. Like I said, with the acquisitions, then you're bringing in new people, the ability to adjust the hierarchy quickly or be able to move somebody from one group to another. That was a nightmare before. So when you reorg, a lot of times you shuffle in the deck and you reorg things. It's the simple drag and drop for us now, and huge improvement.
So just out of curiosity, I know Hunter, you've got another question and slide maybe, and I know we're running up on time, but I have another question. Based on where you were and this process you went into this year and what that took, as you look at 2019 or maybe even now have the visibility to 2020, how long do you think it's going to take to actually get this done in an organized fashion, right? Will it still take the same amount of time, but it's just going to be done more organized? Or can you actually go, well, gosh, that 6-month process, it's not going to take us 4 months to figure this out. We can now this year get it down to 2, and the year after that, we're going to get it down to 1. Like what's
much more significant, much more significant decreases than that. We're coming up with some base assumptions right now as to how we want to level set everything for the year without even looking at what people have. And my other half in incentive comp, he and I will get data set up. Management will be given 2 weeks, and if they don't make adjustments in there, they're done and they go with our numbers. It's going down to be a 2 to 3 week process.
For the whole year?
For the whole year.
You're going to go from a 4-month process to a 2-week process?
Yes.
Wow. Like, I don't even know.
That's why I'm a superstar now.
But I've run sales teams of 10 people and I can't get it done in 2 weeks. Like, that's amazing. Like, it's
huge.
Yeah. What that does also just for morale and like retention and just, aligning the other parts of that honeycomb, like that's fascinating. I'm like,
Richard, one of the bullets here on this slide is Linda had just such clarity in what they wanted to accomplish. They put a date, which made everybody in the room super nervous. A date.
That's an understatement.
But a date on when they were going to have quotas out. And it was 4 months to 1 month that they committed to in front of their leadership team.
Right. That's kind of like saying, if you don't give me a ring by next Thursday, it was over. Right?
It was one of the dustiest things I've seen, but it was great. And I think, go ahead. Sorry. No, I was going to ask you about your planning. So that was one of the things that was also unique and I think made y'all successful is you knew that this was going to be painful to go through an implementation. You knew it was going to be 2 jobs for a period of time. How did you plan that out? And how did you kind of justify it 4 weeks in when you were working 80 hours a week to get to that end state? Because it was hard.
Well, recognize that was, when we started the implementation, it was year end, quarter end, budget time, and quota time. So my job was already more than a full-time job. So as you know, I worked on it a lot, midnight or whatever. But the point is, it was so worth putting those pain points in to be where we're at today. When I look at things that we weren't really able to tell them last year. So say you have a lot of attrition. That was one of the questions that Richard had. The way we've set it up, we can now see when somebody terms, that quota that was set now goes down to an assigned place. And you can see, why are you missing your numbers? Well, because you're able to see the second that I put in a term date, it goes down into a house account, and then we know why we're off. So you can manage the business much better. Well, don't know that helps you get your sales, but you can at least, for me, I have to do the analysis and explain why things are happening the way they are. So for me, that really is a big help. Obviously, it helps the sales management as well. And lets us know, hey, we got to go get people hired in those areas to make sure that we're covering that quota.
That's great. So we got about 2 minutes left, right? And I know we could cover a ton more. I bet we could go another hour without even trying. But how do each of you want to wrap this up in terms of of what this worked for you. What are your key takeaways for people? And of course, I want to give everybody a chance to let them know how to get in touch with each of you. So I'll sort of turn it over to each one of you. I'll let you guys decide who goes first, and we'll go from there.
I'll go first because I'll be quick. Jump in. That's what my takeaway would be jump in, make it a small bite, don't make it a huge bite, so that you are comfortable. I will tell you, I've got 30 plus years experience in FP&A. The system, very easy to work in. I love you, Hunter, but you don't have to have somebody always doing the work for you. I manage it all myself. We don't have IT involved in it. It's been great for us, and like I said, we started our budgeting operational, the finance side this week, because we're going to do our budget in it starting in August.
Yeah.
I have nothing but great things to say, because we're no longer doing the day-to-day just running around trying to fix things. We're actually able to do value add stuff, because the data, we aren't always trying to scrub the data or figure out where the data came from. So that would be my thing. Jump in.
That's great.
Yep.
So I think I'll go next and let Jason close it out. He's much more eloquent than I am by all stretches. Honestly, the key takeaway here from my perspective as a consultant in the SPM space is don't be afraid to admit there's a problem. I know that in sales performance management in particular, it's always scary to raise your hand and say there's a problem. There are solutions out there. No one's going to fault you if you walk in with a clear and defined reason as to why this is a problem, but also a solution. Take your time in making your decision on how you want to solve your challenge. Because as Jason mentioned earlier, there's the symptom and there's the cause. Those are two very different things. Understand both. And if you want to treat the symptom, that's okay. But have a reason why you want to treat the symptom before you dive into an implementation. And then finally, the last piece is don't be afraid. As you go through this process, you will make decisions. All of them will not be right. There will be times where you're jumping out on a limb and testing out a theory. That's okay. Put a stake in the ground on how long you're going to test it, see if it works, and be ready to pivot if it doesn't. All
Jason,
right.
how about you? How would you sort of wrap it up for folks?
Yeah, that was beautiful, Hunter. That was actually perfect. I mean, so it's and what I would say is that if you are gonna, there are plenty of solutions that are point solutions on each of those pieces of the honeycomb, but the challenge is that if you decide to double down and you're going to go to a vendor that just does that one piece, just be sure that you're not treating the symptom, right? And it's actually the root cause is somewhere else, right? So that's why the position that we take is kind of the general physician perspective is let's look at it like holistic healthcare. Let's look at it, figure out where it hurts, and let us figure out what are the best ways to help improve your organization. And also from a how to contact us, we're all on LinkedIn. So certainly I'm Jason Lowe, LOH with Anaplan, and Hunter James. Anyway, you have all our names. And so and so feel free to reach out to us, which was the last part of your thing. And I want to be respectful of your time, Richard. And thank you again.
Yeah, no, I can always go over a minute or two. Okay. But I want to thank, obviously I want to thank Hunter and Jason. Amazing insights, really really opened the eyes to a lot of things and seeing how all this stuff is connected. But I also got to give a special shout out to Linda. Like for an organization like TIBCO to walk into a conversation like this and be willing to say, look at all the stuff we had to fix and expose themselves as an organization. I mean, that says a lot about that organization, not just Linda as a whole. And that's what people want to hear. They want to hear from the folks like Linda. I'm a consultant, Hunter and Jason are consultants. We all have great ideas, but when Linda can support those ideas and show that for lack of a better word, the stuff works or it matters, it means a lot. So Linda, thank you to you and TIBCO and obviously Jason and Hunter, amazing insights. Thank you guys. And for all the audience who stuck with us and stuck over for a couple of minutes, thank you so much. This will be available for video, and we're going to send it out to people. So if you have questions, do that. Reach out to any of us on LinkedIn anytime. I know we're always happy to just share knowledge and connect with people. So thank you again very much, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.